With Cleveland Browns training camp set to begin on Saturday, we give you our last training camp preview as we go into the secondary. A lot of moves have been made, a lot of talent there, a great defense coordinator, hopefully to make it all work. Your latest Locked On Browns with your host, Jeff Lloyd, starts now.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound, LGB, and LOB, the Locked On Browns podcast, brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Your host, Jeff Lloyd. Now my 7th season covering your Cleveland Browns here for Locked On Browns. Ecstatic with the role here at Locked On Browns. Love the network. So thank you, everybody who comes in, the everydayers, everybody who makes Locked On Browns their first listen every single day. Join the everyday crowd. 6,000 plus strong now by subscribing to Locked On Browns YouTube page. Locked On Browns is always available, always free, wherever you get your podcasts. As I said here in the opening, we're going to get to the secondary as we close this out here with training camp set to begin Saturday at the Greenbrier in West Virginia. We're going to focus first on the corners. We're going to talk little safeties. And then the biggest key to the entire Browns defense in 2023, new defense coordinator, Jim Schwartz. But you look at this cornerback room, and did it disappoint last year? I would say definitely at times it certainly did disappoint. We all know, what we heard from the players as far as complaints, too much verbiage, too much, adjustments in, obviously, with motion, guys, shift their roles, shifting coverages. Much verbiage led to issues where it just wasn't going the way the Browns needed to go within the secondary. Denzel Ward, your headliner here. Denzel Ward now begins what was a lucrative contract extension. I know there's naysayers to Denzel Ward. I hear all the time about the injuries. Denzel Ward has missed 5 games over the last 2 years. If that's got you all up in arms, I guess, but it's 5 games. I mean, compared to a lot of football players and the amount of injuries and the amount of blows that NFL players take, 5 games over 2 seasons, it's not ideal by any means whatsoever, but it's certainly not a deal breaker either. Denzel Ward is your number one corner here. The interesting thing with Denzel this year is Jim Schwartz going to use him differently? For me, in my opinion, with Denzel Ward should be your top wide receiver matchup week in, week out. Wherever that receiver goes is where Denzel Ward should go. So if it's on the left side, if it's on the right side, if it's in the slot, that's where Denzel Ward should be. Yeah, am I talking about Jamar Chase? Yeah, we're kind of really probably talking about Jamar Chase. And Denzel, there's times, where you get to see everything from Denzel, and he's just this absolute true number one shutdown cornerback. And then there's times where, you get a lapse or two, and it happens. It's the most difficult position, in my opinion, to play in the NFL. You have no idea what the wide receivers do, and they do, and you got to adjust everything on the fly. Denzel Ward, it should be a big year for Denzel Ward here, because I think Jim Schwartz is just going to let Denzel Ward just go out and cover, be himself, be who he is. Then you get to the Greg Newsome and Martin Emerson. I mean, is there a battle for number 2? I'm sure either one of these guys will not be, thrilled. They're always going to think they want more reps. It's just the way cornerbacks go. With a lot of this and a lot of my viewing on this cornerback room, it comes down to what it takes to get, over the Cincinnati Bengals, because that should be the benchmark right now. You match up well against this group. Tyler Boyd from Cincinnati, and of course T. Higgins. Martin Emerson, a bigger physical guy, was really, really good last year in finding a way to not get himself in difficult spots as far as penalties for as physical as he is. Martin Emerson, T. Higgins. But Martin Emerson, this is going to be really, really interesting here, because, the Browns are going to have a decision to make, sooner than later on the way the future of this cornerback room is going to go. Sadly, you can't pay everybody, but Greg Newsome has been good to this point, certainly as Martin Emerson. Greg Newsome is going to be, it's going to be interesting the way it works him. Obviously the talk of the slot And, Greg Newsome obviously told us all that he was just not a fan. It's not something he wanted to do, and it's totally understandably so. You're a cornerback. Your mentality is put me on the island against their best guy one-on-one. If you don't have that theory in your head, if that's not what drives you to play the cornerback position, the position just ain't for you. But these guys are going to get a lot of reps this year, and I really, really think you're going to see a strong season out of three of these guys. The Browns are loaded at individual talent at the cornerback position up top. It's just going to be a situation there where this individual talent needs to coexist within an 11-man defense, and I think a guy like Jim Schwartz is just the guy to make sure that all happens. You get to your depth pieces. Obviously, Cameron Mitchell was drafted out of Northwestern. He and Greg Newsome, obviously, with a relationship. Cam Mitch can play on the inside, can play on the outside, can play special teams. I think the Browns truly valued his diversity and the amount of reps and snaps that was taken in his time at Northwestern. So he slots in at your number 4 corner. It's still, to be seen, with the Browns when they go to dime. Is it going to be a 3 safety, 3 cornerbacks? Are they going to play 4 corners? Are they going to play 2 safeties? I've hinted about this a little bit as well. Is there a possibility Grant Delpit takes some dime reps at the linebacker position, just so you're trying to get your best athletes, your best coverage guys on the field all at one time? AJ Green, and it's starting to get interesting here for AJ Green, because I think AJ Green is probably to the point where he deserves a bigger role. But the problem is he's just on a team that's loaded at the cornerback position and is very, very top heavy. So unless there's an injury, AJ Green is not going to see very many reps, and that's a tough spot to be in. And for a guy like AJ Green, and for a guy like anybody, you're always looking for what your opportunity can be. So I'm sure that's kind of what the thought process is for AJ Green here, going into his 3rd year here with the team. Mike Ford was signed with a special teams mentality. And that's going to be interesting too, because, there's going to be some younger guys here who make less money. But you would think Mike Ford kind of has a home here, as the Browns, signed him as a true plus special teamer, I should say. Closing out the room, Thomas Graham is a guy I love, but I think Thomas Graham is going to be a real difficult spot for Thomas Graham to make this roster here in 2023. Right away, you're looking at maybe a cornerback 7 spot, and that's just a tough spot to be in. Cameron Biggers is here. Tanner McAllister. It's interesting. Tanner McAllister can play corner, can play safety. He'll have a big opportunity. And obviously, when you get undrafted free agents from big schools like Ohio State, the moment is not too big for any of these guys. They can easily come into a training camp, and I don't want to say dominate, but show really, really well, and find a way for an NFL team to say, hey, here's a chance to save some money. And we got a guy who's played in big games against big time competition. So Tanner McAllister, certainly a name to watch here. We'll get to his former Ohio State teammate in a minute here in segment 2. Chris Westry also here as well. Browns have a lot of corners. It's a really, really good group. Again, it's really, really top heavy. And I think with Jim Schwartz at the helm here, this is going to be a very, very special group. It really should be. And I think the biggest key to it all, and as we've heard from the players, and now we heard from Jim Schwartz, is that he's just going to try to keep it simple. You guys just go out, do what you do, cover. You know what I'm saying? A lot of man-on-man, a lot of cover one, maybe a little safety help here every now and then. But until I see the reason, that I've got to change things up, mix things up, and try to surprise the offense, there's no reason I should. I've got 2 first-round picks at cornerback. I got a 3rd-round pick at cornerback. These are my top 3 corners. These kids can play. I am Jeff Lloyd, host here at Locked On Browns. Appreciate you all for being along for the ride. We're going to switch it up here. We're going to go to the safety room here next. I appreciate everybody who makes Locked On Browns their first listen every single day. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week, all season long. Whether you're preparing for a draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So with Draft Pip underway for the upcoming season, let's see who Vinny has picked out for us on this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Players of the Week. If you're looking to make a smooth turn in fantasy football snake drafts with the last pick in the first round and first pick in the second round, catch an initial spark for your roster by revving up with 2 elite NFC East wide receivers, the Cowboys' CeeDee Lamb and the Eagles' A.J. Brown. A letter-perfect guaranteed
early fit. Count on Lamb driving Dak Prescott and Dallas's new look passing game to big numbers, and Brown revving up Jalen Hurts downfield throwing often again in Philadelphia. Vinny Iyer from Locked On Fantasy Football is going to help you win your fantasy football championship, and eBay Motors knows the championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. With eBay Guaranteed Fit and over 122 million parts and accessories for your vehicle right at your fingertips, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Air filters, brakes, batteries, taillights, alternators, shocks, struts, you name it, eBay Motors has it. And they'll make sure it's the right fit for your car, because eBay Guaranteed Fit helps you understand exactly what part you need for your vehicle the first time. So go forth, switch gears, crank the AC, and say goodbye to sweating if your ride needs a little fixing up. Because now you know you'll always be set up for success from the get-go. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, everything your vehicle is calling for is just a click away. For the parts and accessories that fit your vehicle, just look for the green check. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices at ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. We continue here, your latest Locked On Browns, your host, Jeff Lloyd. Appreciate everybody who makes Locked On Browns their first listen every single day. Again, join the everyday crowd by subscribing to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Locked On Browns, always available, always free, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm going to switch it up here, talk a little bit on the secondary play. And look, Grant Delpit going into the final year of his rookie contract. As we all know, we never got to see Grant Delpit in his rookie year. Early in camp, the Achilles blew during the COVID year. We got to see in year 2 and year 3, Grant Delpit didn't come out of the gate very strong. Year 2 kind of maybe made some sense as trying to restore your confidence within the Achilles, all while you're trying to learn the NFL game and NFL life. And then you saw a really, really strong second half from Grant Delpit. With a lot of players, when we talked about last year, as far as the defensive side of the ball is concerned, they started slow, and definitely understandable as well on that side. It just wasn't a good defense out of the gate. But Grant Delpit was a player whose play picked up as the year went on. Started to play, a little bit more, less thinking, just more reacting. And this is what we talk about. When there was problems with communication last year, it gets you late to what you're doing. So as there's so much verbiage, you're having not enough time to go through your final mental checklist in your head before each snap. This is my guy. This is what his tendency. And so all these things that go through your mind in a blink of a second. But if you're still worried, getting verbiage to the left, to the right, trying to communicate with your teammates, you're not being able to do that last mental check that a defensive back would do. Grant Delpit, it's been a nice run thus far. It's going to be interesting how year 4 goes here. I think with the traditional free safety in the room and Juan Thornhill, we're going to get to see Grant Delpit a little more closer to the box, a little more maybe on tight ends, on running backs. And I will keep spewing this because I think it's a possibility that if the Browns get into a situation where they're lacking some confidence in the dime linebacker as far as coverage is concerned, it gives you an opportunity to put 4 corners on the field. And as we said, Browns have plenty of cornerbacks. You can play McLeod, you can play Thornhill together, and you can maybe use Grant Delpit as your dime linebacker. It's something that's very, very intriguing to me. It's getting your best athletes on the field, of course, getting best coverage guys on the field, of course. And Grant Delpit, he's one of the best blockers you have. Juan Thornhill, you went out, you needed this free safety. The entire John Johnson thing just never worked out, and the Browns deserve just as much blame there as John Johnson III does as well. But you go out, now you get this true athletic, rangy, on the roof free safety in Juan Thornhill. Was a player we loved out of the University of Virginia. Absolutely loved him. Crazy, crazy athletic player. Had a cornerback background. Can play some nickel if you needed him to. Juan Thornhill, and again, we've gotten to this before, is bringing in players who have expectations every year to play playoff football and to conceivably play in a Super Bowl. Juan Thornhill's been part of 3 of them. Juan Thornhill has 2 Super Bowl rings. These are the type of players you need to bring in to start changing the culture and starting to change the belief within a franchise, within a team, within a locker room, that your ultimate goal is to be playing for the Lombardi. And you go out and you bring these type of players in here. Juan Thornhill is going to be really, really exciting, rocking the number 1. I'm really excited. This is a player I enjoyed coming out of Virginia. This is a player I enjoyed during the draft cycle. And, obviously first time with the Kansas City Chiefs, he's been a player. Browns are counting on some, turnovers, some interceptions from this defense. And Juan Thornhill is probably a guy that can be a key part in making that happen. The Rodney McLeod signing, that was just kind of like icing on the cake. You got a guy who was available late, had familiarity with your defensive coordinator. He was good. He was really good last year for the Indianapolis Colts. And then you get this chance where he can get to basically reunite with Jim Schwartz on a team with legitimate aspirations and a role for him. He's not going to have to play every snap. He's always been a really good ball hawk, Rodney McLeod, and the Browns can kind of put him into those situations. And it does give Jim Schwartz the advantage of, having a guy already who kind of understands him, who kind of knows how he works, a guy that can help with explanations, with film study, and seeing things through Jim Schwartz's eyes. It's always difficult to do when you're learning a new defense coordinator, but Rodney McLeod obviously can be a guy who can help with that. The interesting, part of this room gets to this. Now, normally when you figure roster breakdowns, normally secondary players, you're figuring about 10. It's going to be difficult for the Browns to even get to 6 corners, of course. So that normally means 3, 4 safeties. They already got 3 we know they're keeping. And then you get to the obviously you get to the holdovers of the Anthony Bell from last year. It was a really, really good special teamer. Didn't get a ton of in-game reps. So we'll see if the Anthony could find a role here in this Jim Schwartz defense. For me, the name to absolutely watch here in training camp is Ronnie Hickman, former Ohio State Buckeye, of course. The Browns hit Columbus this year and hit it hard. For players that will be with the Browns in training camp, Ronnie Hickman, in my opinion, was a guy that deserved to be drafted. Why he wasn't, I'll never know. I think Ronnie Hickman can help you as a nickel. I think Ronnie Hickman can help you as a safety. And again, when you get undrafted free agents out of big-time programs like Ohio State, these guys, yes, they weren't drafted, but you got to usually view them and think that these are guys with legitimate shots to make your roster. The moment's never going to be too big for them. They've played against the top competition. There's a spot Ronnie Hickman can make this roster. It's probably going to come at the loss for, the Anthony Bell here. But Ronnie Hickman, in my opinion, should be one of the stars for the Browns in preseason games. He's going to get out there playing against competition that he's better than. And you should probably find a way to, have a lot of success for the Browns here this year. He's going to be really, really fun to watch. Bubba Bolden fills out the room there. But it's a really, safeties right now, they're going into camp with 6. As we said, we still have that 1 roster spot open. Perrion Winfrey did clear waivers today. So, whatever for Perrion, whatever's next, whatever. I just can't. I can't. It was just too many times. It was too many incidents. And I tried to give him one last chance. And here we are 2 days out of training camp. And, still with the immaturity and the nonsense, there's just no time for it. We got a big season ahead of us. I ain't got time for guys that aren't focused. And I think the Browns 100% agree as well. We're going to talk a little bit more about Jim Schwartz and obviously this new role here with the Cleveland Browns, the type of talent he's got around him. And, for Jim Schwartz, one last time to show everybody that, maybe he's still kind of one of the best there is as far as defense coordinators in the NFL. Jeff Lloyd, your latest Locked On Browns. Appreciate you all for being along for the ride. This is Jeff Lloyd. We are closing out training camp previews. We got to some secondary talk here. We know a little Jim Schwartz talk here. I appreciate everybody who makes Locked On Browns their first listen. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Make sure your notifications are on so when the content drops, you guys are all there to absorb it. Wherever you get your podcast, Locked On Browns is always available, always free. We're in a world now where a lot of big media outlets are doing away with day-to-day coverage of your favorite teams, which is just fine, because if you all want to start bringing your eyes over to the Locked On Podcast Network, we'd be thrilled to have you. All NFL teams covered, all NBA teams covered, all MLB teams covered. We got you over here at Locked On. So if it's the first time for you, hit that subscribe button. Stick around. Now, Jim Schwartz. Now, this was a staggering stat, and this obviously isn't Jim Schwartz related, but if you want to kind of have an idea, well, it is actually Jim Schwartz related. Cleveland Browns gave up 150 yards on the ground last year. Seven times. Jim Schwartz, 8 times in his 4 years with the Philadelphia Eagles. 8 times in 4 seasons. Browns gave up 150 yards on the ground 7 times just last season. We still hope one more defensive tackle should be brought in here. And we all thought that before Perion Winfrey, so let's not act like it's anything new, guys. I think everybody's in agreement with me there. But now you look at what has been done. You spend money on a Dalvin Tomlinson. You spend money on an Okoronkwo. You spend money on a Zadarius Smith. You draft an Isaiah McGuire. You draft a Siani Ika. You go to the linebacker room. And again, it's going to be interesting because it's not going to be a focal point of the defense. It's basically going to be 1st and 10, hold them, get them to 2nd and 8, get them to 2nd and 7, and then the Anthony Walkers of the world, the Sione Takis of the world, the Ikas, they're all going to start coming off the field because we're going to get more pass rush onto the field. That is kind of the overall premise here for Jim Schwartz, and he just wants a defensive line that can continually threaten the backfield, blow up running plays, make a quarterback's life a living hell. And you look at it, 5 deep minimum at the edge with Miles, with Zadarius, with Okoronkwo. Then you get to McGuire, the Alex Wrights of the world, Isaiah Thomas. Does he still have a leg to stand on in that room as well? The Dalvin Tomlinson, and he's going to need the help. And for right now, I guess it's going to be Ika. The two of them really, really need to be strong, tough penetrators. They need to disrupt this running game for the Jim Schwartz plan of putting pass rushers on the field and just cover guys on the field to slow down. And, obviously you're building this defense with the thought process of the Bengals offense, of what the Ravens offense looks like it's going to be now, or it's going to be more of a throwing team and getting more wide receivers involved. I mean, keep in mind, this team can go Odell, Bateman, and obviously the rookies, A. Flowers. They are deep in the wide receiver room as well. You have a really, really good tight end down in Baltimore, obviously with Andrews. You have a young emerging tight end in Pittsburgh with Freiermuth. You have, the outside weapons in Pittsburgh. It's all going to come down to Pickett. But this is a huge task here for Jim Schwartz because he's coming into this. And, a lot of this is going to be as far as, is this Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski regime going to get the opportunity in 2024? They're going to have to show. There's a lot of pressure on this head coach. There's a lot of pressure on this general manager. So bringing in, obviously, Jim Schwartz was a huge, huge get. And was a really, really smart get because I'm not saying anybody's hanging by a thread. But when there's questions, you want to make sure you go out and you try to get yourself the best possible man for the job. And they did that with a guy like Jim. And they had to work really, really hard and really, really quickly because they had to get a lot of assets quickly because there was not a lot of holdovers from this defense from last season. And rightfully so, because it just wasn't good, of course. But you look and there's a lot of teeth here at the defensive line position. Secondary, there are a lot of players here, 6, 7 at the cornerback position. You look at the safety room. Then there's, guys like Hickman, guys like Tanner McAllister. These guys can do different things. all of these things at your disposal. So Jim Schwartz comes in here, and obviously the guys on defense are kind of looking for a savior, because I think they all feel that they were better than the way this defense looked last year. And they also feel that the pressure of what's going on in this locker room, because once the Browns had that little run in 2020, that took this from a team where everything felt like the little engine that could, to a team with legit aspirations, with legit pressures to be a successful unit. And it just didn't happen. So now you're getting to the point where if you're going to start changing maybe a head coach, what does that do personnel wise? How comfortable can these guys be in their spots within the organization themselves? Because as we all know, you bring in new coaches, things change, players move on, new personnel comes in. It's a really, really tough spot to be in. And I think this team truly has a 2 to 4 year window in front of them. They truly, truly do. But it's going to be the key, and we all know the offensive side, and obviously it all comes down to Deshaun. But this defense on paper is a top 10 defense. This defense on paper is potentially a top 5 defense. You need to achieve that. You need to play like that. And you need to play like that starting week 1, because you're coming out hot with a lot of tough teams in front of you. Jim Schwartz is and was the right man for the job. Veteran tested, Tennessee, Detroit, Buffalo, Philadelphia. Every now and then, coverage-wise, he can kind of get a little out of his own head. But if he's going to stick with this KISS, keep it simple, stupid mentality, and I'm not going to go crazy and start playing chess until they start beating me when we're playing checkers. And Jim Schwartz has got the personnel he needs. The key is going to be to get this honed quickly and be ready to go for week 1 against the Cincinnati Bengals. Closing out our training camp preview series, secondary today, the cornerbacks, the safeties, Jim Schwartz. It's been fun. I'm so excited for this to get started this weekend. Granted, it is only going to be July 22nd, and it feels weird to say that maybe we're full-fledged in a football season, but heck yeah, I am full-fledged in a football season on July 22nd, no question about it. I appreciate everybody who's followed along over the last 2 weeks as we gotten through all these preview series, covering each positional room, and now it's getting closer and closer to start seeing it all come together for real, and I could not be more excited about it. Jeff Lloyd, your host here at Locked On Browns, been here for 7 seasons with Locked On Browns. I'll be here another 7 if they have me. I appreciate everybody who makes Locked On Browns their first listen every single day. Join the everyday crowd. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Locked On Browns is always available, always free, wherever you get your podcasts. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. LGB on the LOB. Let's go Browns.